Thank you, everyone. And I'm so impressed. I kind of was expecting that not as many people would come down from West Palm to our campus here in Boca, so I'm very excited to see all of you come out this early to our campus to learn about human trafficking, the word surreal, and what we do at Place of Hope. If everybody could start off for a minute with me, close your eyes for a second, and think back to 13-year-old you. And try to remember what was important to you back then at this time of your life. What were the things that you wanted? Some things that you really needed? Who were the people important to you? Maybe you wanted attention. You wanted that cute girl to say hi to you, or that guy to sit next to you in class. Maybe you just wanted your parents to really get you and really understand you. Now imagine you have all those wants and needs and the awkward things that are going on at this time of our life, and someone really close to you, very important to you, starts abusing you every day over the next couple of years. And so one day things get so bad that you just know, you're 17 now, let's say, and you just know that you can't handle this anymore, and so you leave. You run away, you hit the streets, maybe you're couch surfing, you have no game plan. All you know is that what you just left, you could never ever go back to. And so you don't know where you're gonna end up, you're just on the streets trying to survive day to day. You can open your eyes now, and we'll come back to this. And as I'm talking more about surreal and human trafficking and more, throughout this discussion, kind of keep that 13-year-old young person in the back of your mind and kind of look at what I'm talking about from the perspective of that person. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But before I go any further, I just have to confess that when I first was told by Nicole that I was going to be talking about the word surreal, at first I was like, oh man, why did I get that word? It seemed like it was going to be hard for me to really talk about, because I don't use that word a lot in my day-to-day conversation. And honestly, when I think of the word surreal, I had this like abstract craziness going on in my head that was kind of like a cross between this picture and the picture that was used for this event. It just was very abstract to me, and so I had to really stop and see and look at the definitions and really try to understand what we were talking about. And so out of all the definitions I found, the one that I loved the most said that the elements in it are combined in a strange way that you normally wouldn't expect. And as I stopped and tried to think about what I would talk about and the stories I would share, and looking back on different events in my life, I realized that my life was the definition of surreal, that all these different moments that were surreal happened randomly throughout my life, but came together for a purpose for the work that we're doing today that I'll share with you later on. So I could tell you some really fun, surreal stories that I thought were cool, such as after waiting your whole life and finally going to a Backstreet Boys concert and standing in line, waiting to go in, and Kevin Richardson walks right past you, like 5 feet away, right? You're freaking out, big fangirl moment, even though you're way older than you should be to be freaking out like that. Or maybe going to see Tim Tebow and asking him to autograph my Florida Gator high tops that my husband said were way too embarrassing for me to bring and show you guys today, so I didn't. So I'll just keep those stories to myself though, because I have a feeling that that's probably not what you came here today to learn about. That's not very inspiring, right? I'll just be proud of those in the back of my mind. But the stories that I want to share with you, some of the most surreal moments of my life happened abroad. We'll start there. When I was 15 or 16 years old, my mom and I, who was here, took a leap of faith and traveled to Uganda independent of any organization. We literally went to central Uganda, lived with a family in a rural community. We did have some electricity, but that was about it. And I must say that I am not someone that's good at roughing it. I consider camping when like the power goes out in your house and you have to go to a hotel. That's the closest I get to camping. So when I arrived to my home that we were staying at and found that this was going to be our bathroom, okay, this latrine, I was 1000% positive that I would never have to go to the bathroom ever again. I remember standing there looking at this actual latrine and thinking, nope, I'm never going to have to go to the bathroom. God's going to do a miracle and I'm just never going to have to go for the next 8.5 weeks. This was going to be our laundry. This was going to be our kitchen, and that was going to be our dinner, okay? This was a total world change for me. I am not that kind of person, and even today, I can't even believe that I ever did this because I'm still not that person. But while we were there, and while there's so many different stories I could go into to share with you, crazy things that when I tell my husband, he's like, how are you still alive? You should never have done that. I've picked a few that were some of the most impactful. And so the first one I want to share with you, go back to visualizing here. Picture like a small African town, okay? There's these banana trees everywhere. There's people cooking on the side of the road, so you smell smoke, and there's motorcycle taxis buzzing by. And then picture in that very African environment, you have two Mzungus, they called us, white people, standing on the side of the road, looking completely lost, okay? That would be 16-year-old Laura and my mother. We were taking a taxi going to an orphanage, and the taxi only went so far. So it literally dumped us out on the side of this road. We've never been to this town before. We've never been to the orphanage we're going to. Most people don't speak English. So we're standing there, the taxi has left, and we're wondering, what are we gonna do? And motorcycle taxis are coming up and they're offering us rides, and we're saying, no, we're good. We know not to get in a car with a stranger in another country, we're good. So we start walking. We have no idea if it's the right direction. We just figure, well, we'll just start going somewhere. And this white pickup truck pulls up next to us, and we look at it. In the back of the truck, it's full of pineapples. So we assume that this man is a pineapple farmer. And I don't remember the exact conversation, but he must have said to me, hey, do you need to go somewhere? We must have told him the orphanage, and he must have appeared fairly certain he could get us there, because before I know it, we're getting in the car with this pineapple farmer. I remember getting in the front seat and seeing a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror and thinking, okay, I guess this is gonna be okay. So disclaimer here, do not ever get in a car in a foreign country with somebody you don't know. My husband told me I do not need to put that in here because nobody's dumb enough to do that, but just in case, I just wanna make sure I put that in there as a disclaimer. So we end up at a hotel. He goes inside, makes a phone call. We're hoping he's calling to get better directions to this orphanage. And meanwhile, we're sitting there thinking, we are going to die. No one's gonna know that we're here. We never checked in with like an American embassy or anything. By the time our family finds out we're dead, it's gonna be 2 months later. We're gonna die in this pickup truck of this pineapple farmer. Turns out that nice pineapple farmer ended up being nothing more than that, a nice guy who took us to where we needed to go and didn't expect anything in return. I mean, it was a miracle because so many things could have gone wrong. And once we got to the orphanage, we got to meet Bridget. And Bridget, who's here on the left, she's much older than she appears. She had tuberculosis and many other issues. And I remember holding her in this picture, and she would always try to reach out and grasp the lace that was on the bottom of my Goodwill skirt. But she never had the strength in her hands to actually close her hands and grasp it. She was so weak. And in this moment, I remember thinking about how I wanted to commit my life to serving those that are forgotten, these marginalized people in society. I mean, Bridget's future did not look good at that moment, and nobody in America, no one knew her by name, right? But I knew that there were many more children like her as well that needed help, so it kind of fueled my passion to keep working for this type of population. Another surreal moment was when this young man, Ronald, came to us and told us that his sister had died. And so we went to his home. He lived in this is very traditional, like mud hut, dirt floor, African home. And we walk in, and his mother is sitting at the back on the floor, kneeling down. So we walked up to her, and I took her hands and kneeled down in front of her. And I tried to offer my condolences in a way that could go past the language barrier that we had. And as I'm sitting here holding her hands, she pulls her hands back and pulls back a blanket. And beneath the blanket was her dead baby girl. And it's been 10 years and I still could cry about it. And I remember, when they say in that moment that time truly stood still. I mean, seriously, as I'm looking at this dead baby toddler right in front of me, she had already started to become bloated from being deceased. And as I'm looking at her, all I could think about was if this child had been born in America, she probably would be alive today. The chances of her dying of a preventative illness of some kind probably were pretty high. And at the time I was doing a lot of, kind of work with this area, and there was this quote that we kept saying that I had heard from somewhere that said, where you live should not determine whether you get to live. And that became so real for me in that moment. We also went to northern Uganda. And in northern Uganda, this region had been terrorized by Joseph Kony, you might have heard of him, and the Lord's Resistance Army. For over 20 years, he was pillaging through villages, raping children, turning them to child soldiers, murdering their families, having them murder their parents. And so we went about 2 or 3 years after he had left the region to go see for ourselves what had happened. The roads were still destroyed from the bombs they would throw. Our car had to drive on the side. They would bomb the roads, so cars would have to slow down, they could ambush them. There were still signs in the towns warning of landmines that could be in the area. These are things we did not tell our family before we went. There might be landmines, we'll just keep that to ourselves. And while we were there, we met a man, and we were talking to him, and when you looked at him, you would notice that some of his facial features were different. His lips had been cut off by Joseph Kony's army. This was a signature thing. They'd cut off their lips and noses, and the whole idea at the time, they said, was that now that we've cut your lips off, you can't tell others what we've done to you. And it was so ironic to have this man standing in front of me telling me what had happened to him. He showed us on his back these healed scars from where they stabbed him multiple times with a bayonet right before they forced him to carry these heavy items they looted from the villages and walk with them for days at a time. When I heard his story, I became committed to come back to the States and tell his story and let others know what was happening. People were just starting to talk about this issue with invisible children, different groups like that. It was just starting to kind of come to light. And so we really took it seriously to come back and educate the communities. At the time, I didn't know he was a victim of human trafficking. I didn't have those words. I wasn't into that issue yet. But looking back, I realized he definitely was. So all of these experiences have really played into what I do today and the work that I do. But at the time, what I learned the most was that anyone could make a difference. And I felt like the average person didn't recognize how easy it could be. Keep in mind, I was only 15 or 16 years old. I didn't have any degrees. My dad was an inner city pastor. We did not have any money. We're probably still paying off those trips. So it wasn't like we had all these resources, right, that we could pull from. But investing in people and forming these relationships and being there present with them made all the difference. I've always been drawn to these dark topics, and my dad is very academically minded, so at a very young age we learned about the Holocaust, we learned about genocide and war, and so that kind of shaped my perspective growing up and looking at these issues. When I was in college, I studied the Holocaust for a whole semester and specialized my paper in the Nazi human experiments, and I quickly found that there were so many different types of human experiments the Nazis tortured their victims with that I couldn't even put it in one paper. So at the end of that class, we went to Europe and toured a lot of these key sites. I remember standing in the Dachau concentration camp, and it was an overcast day, it was really drizzly, and I was taken aback by how beautiful the forest was. It almost felt magical with the rain and just the beautiful forest, and there was this little cottage up the way, and I thought, wow, that's a quaint cottage. And then I had to stop and remember where I was. I was standing in a concentration camp. That quaint cottage was a crematorium that still had the ovens in them. And it really brought to light the dark moments of our past and what we are capable of doing to our fellow human. Sachsenhausen was my first concentration camp. It's a smaller one that I went to. And I was touring one of the buildings. And I was in the basement touring the rooms, and I got separated from my group. And this is not uncommon because I can get lost anywhere I go. But I started to panic because I was in another country, people don't really speak English, and I didn't have a phone that would work to call my classmates. And so I'm passing through these rooms that used to store dead bodies. And I started having a lot of anxiety about being stuck down here by myself in this horrible place. But then I tried to think about, imagine what it would have been like to be here, to be the one working in this room, to have your loved one going through these horrific experiences. And I tried to use that perspective to get a little bit of a window into what life might have been like. We went to Auschwitz, and I remember going in one of these buildings, and the hallway was lined with dozens and dozens of individual photos of prisoners. And I made eye contact with one man, but I will never get his face out of my head. He was an older man, probably a grandfather, and I pictured him being like soft-spoken, very humble, very kind. But it was really hard to know what he truly would have been like because his face was full of sheer horror. And I just looked at his picture trying to imagine what had he just witnessed, or what had they threatened him with? What did he know was about to come to have this look on his face of sheer horror? It made me so sad, and 6 months later I really would get emotional talking about it because it just impacted me so much. And again, looking at this and studying this helped to really show me that there's still violence happening today in today's world. We're still exploiting each other. We're still harming each other. And I knew that we had a lot of work to be done, but I didn't quite know yet what my role would be with this. Today, in my role as the Human Trafficking Prevention and Education Coordinator at Place of Hope, I'm still having surreal moments every day. I run groups with our girls in a juvenile detention center, educating them about human trafficking. And the very first one we ever did, the first day these girls meet me, they're talking about their experience being raped at 11. And then another one saying, oh yeah, I was raped too. Oh yeah, me too. Day one, I'm a stranger, and it's so common, it's so normal to them that they've all been raped, that they're freely telling me this. Stories of trauma that shape the trajectory of their life, and they may permanently have been impacted by that and may never be able to recover from what was done to them. I go out with law enforcement and do outreach on the streets to women that have worked in prostitution for 20 or 30 years. And to the rest of the world, they may look like that dirty drug addict prostitute. But many of them have been doing this since they were 11 years old. And I'm talking right here in West Palm is where I go. 11 years old. So they've been doing this, they turn 18, they age out, they're no longer seen as a victim, now they're a consenting adult. And they're still a victim to me because they just weren't rescued in time before they turned 18. But 20, 30 years later, what does the world see them as? So let's go back. To really understand this issue of human trafficking, you have to look at it from the perspective of a victim. And when you just look at it on the surface, it's not going to make any sense. And it's just going to be very confusing. But once you look deeper and you know what to look for, you'll start to see what's hidden in plain sight. And you'll start to recognize. So go back, close your eyes again, and let's go back to that 13-year-old youth that we were talking about in the beginning. Remember, she was being abused, she ran away, she's on the streets. And the reason she ran away may be justifiable, right? I would run too. But now she's become the most ideal candidate for human trafficking. She's homeless, she's lacking social connections, she probably has to rely on somebody to get her places. She's obviously new to the streets, so people that are familiar with the streets know she doesn't belong there, and she's sticking out like a sore thumb. This is not what she thought was going to happen, this is not the life she had planned, but all she knows is I can't go back to what I ran from. So they come up to her, and this is a very common line that traffickers will use. They'll come up and say, "Hey girl, you're too pretty to be out here on the streets. Come with me, I'll take care of you, I'll protect you. You know what will happen to you, let me protect you, let me help you make some money." And so she goes with them. And before you know it, she's engaging in full-blown prostitution. She's hanging out with this guy that calls her her girlfriend, her boyfriend. He's getting her stripping in a club, right? Then it starts to run into some money trouble, and he's beating her. He's saying, "Hey, you're not making enough. You got to work with guys outside the club. You'll make more money." And even though he beats me, I still have him to go home to. It's still someone that wants me. It's still someone that's there for me. It's still someone that's protecting me. And think about it. If you had been in her shoes, what would you have done, honestly? Because I would have said, yes, I don't want to get raped again. I want some money. I don't want to be on the streets. Given those choices, what would you do in her situation? Keep in mind, she's still a minor. She's only 17. So when law enforcement comes and asks me if I'm a human trafficking victim, think I'm going to cooperate? No, but I'm a victim. I would never betray this guy, the only person that brought me up when I was at my lowest, right? I'm loyal to him now. And so law enforcement get frustrated with me because I don't want to cooperate with them. But don't forget, at the end of the day, I'm a victim of human trafficking. This is not what I wanted, but it's what ended up happening to me because of the initial abuse that I experienced and because I ran. This is just an example. But I'll tell you that I've stood on the streets of West Palm with a woman who was in probably her 30s or 40s, and she was freaking out because she couldn't make 20 bucks that day. 20 bucks was all she needed to go home to her trafficker, and she knew what would happen if she didn't make it. The scars on her body showed past times where she came home and she came up short, and her boyfriend, trafficker, drug dealer, made sure she knew what would happen if it happened again. This is the current state of our cities. This is Palm Beach County. This is West Palm Beach. This is Florida. This is happening in our own backyard and in our communities. But if you're willing to look closer, you'll start to recognize, you'll start to see how close this hits to home. That $20 story really stands out to me because how many of you guys would put your life on $20? But for this young lady, she is out there freaking out because her life literally depends on making that $20. But I believe that we all can have an impact. So I've pulled some lessons from all the stories I've just told you for what I'm calling my little recipe for having an impact. Meeting people where they are was the essence of what we were doing in Africa. We were going, we didn't know what we were going to do. We just knew we had to go and be with the people, literally live with them, and understand what their needs were before we even started making plans of how we could help. We couldn't come in with our own ideas. We had to go and see what the need was and try to meet it. Taking on their perspective and recognizing that there are people that have been handed different life situations that we weren't born into. And until you look at it from their perspective, you won't see all the solutions that are there to try to help them. You have to put yourself in their shoes. Studying the Holocaust and going to the actual sites where a lot of these atrocities took place really showed me that this world is broken and we need to be brought together. So doing whatever you can every day to unite us and to bring people closer together, even the smallest ways can have an impact. And then finally, always having hope. I mean, I love that I work for a place that's literally called Place of Hope, Because if we don't have hope and we can't deliver it to others and show them that, hey, there's another side to your story. There's so much more that's waiting for you. Don't give up now. That can change a life instantly. But let me tell you, it is hard work making a difference. They say that less than 1% of human trafficking victims will ever get rescued. Less than 1%. I mean, why even try? But I believe we should always try. Even if there's one person being trafficked out there, I believe we have a human trafficking problem and we need to work to rescue that person. So keep pushing through, even when the stats are against us. I believe that with all of us working to combat this issue, we can change that statistic. We can bring way more home if we all come together. So now what? Hopefully, I've got you all motivated to want to get involved with this issue. I mean, it's in our community, and I really do believe that we can't wait for someone else to make a difference. It has to start with us. And I know that in surreal moments, sometimes it can be hard to understand the significance of it or the value of it, because you kind of get disoriented sometimes. All those stories I told you happened randomly throughout my life, and I didn't even fully understand the importance of most of that until, honestly, I was in this role and I started pulling on things that I did 10 years ago in Africa. And so don't get, caught off guard with the surreal moments. Keep putting it in the back of your mind, knowing that it could be preparing you for another time of your life. So I just want to give you briefly, as we're wrapping up here, a few things of how you can get involved with this issue of human trafficking. Keep in mind that a victim can be anyone, and many times these victims are trafficked by people that got to know them. So if you've got kids, watch that social media, because that is a window into your child that our kids don't realize is putting them at risk. At Place of Hope, we take in these kids on our campuses and provide them residential care. But we also have a whole prevention side that we do in addition to the aftercare services. We're releasing a short film later this spring that will be a statewide look at human trafficking, and so there's a sign up back here if you want to stay tuned and be informed of when that releases. Please sign up and we'll make sure you know. We also do awareness presentations. So we'll come in to your company, to your religious group, to your youth group, really to any group, and train and educate your staff, your community on human trafficking. We do it for the medical field, we do it for the hospitality industry, we do a general one, we do one for parents. So again, we do these for free. So if you ever want to have us come in and talk to your group, there's a sign up back there as well, and we can bring the education to you. We also do an outreach for in the community where we raise awareness of missing children. If you look around the room and on the back of the chairs, you'll see that there's missing children flyers all over. These are all missing kids from our community right now. There's a lot of them. There's so many more pages that I couldn't even go through them all. It is very overwhelming. So what we do to try to combat that is we have volunteers that go out once a month to hotels in West Palm and Boca and bring these flyers of missing children, and just go into the hotel and ask, hey, do you recognize any of these missing kids? And we collect the tips and we pass them on to our law enforcement partners, who then get to follow up and try to recover these kids. So we have a sign up back there and more information if you'd ever want to volunteer with us. It's once a month, it's 2 hours on a Saturday, and that's it. And then finally, we do groups for girls at risk and for boys of being trafficked. And really any young person is at risk of being trafficked, no matter what economic background they come from or what age they are. And so we go in, like that detention center I was talking about, we go into other groups and schools and community groups to educate the kids on human trafficking. And so we'll do that for free as well. So if you've got a group or a school or some kind of connection to youth that we could come in and provide that education, there's a sign up back there. Please take my card. We'd be happy to come and bring that group to you as well. So the last thing I want to end with here is one of my favorite quotes that I learned about back when I was first getting started with this issue. And it's from William Wilberforce, and I love it because it says, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never say again that you did not know." And I love this quote a little selfishly because it tells me that, hey, I did my job and I let you all know about this horrible issue. And the only thing wrong you could do today is to leave here and not choose to become involved with it, not choose to join the fight. January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And so of all months, this is a great time, and I really encourage you that before you leave today, really commit to doing one thing. There's sign up for something, join our mailing list, whatever it may be. Share us, like us on Facebook. Choose today to join the fight, because these traffickers are hoping that regular people in the community won't learn what to look for, won't recognize it, will just be passive about it, and that's how they can bring these victims all around us every day. So please, we at Place of Hope, we'd love to have you join us in this fight to bring this freedom to our counterparts that don't have the freedom to enjoy all the things that we get to do and are entrapped in modern day slavery. Thank you so much.